if what is going to earn me God's approval is holy living, but I'm sold into sin because of my carnal nature, until help comes from outside, I really, really cannot please God. I really, really cannot achieve that thing, because the requirement for my healing is actually what I lack.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Saint Wale. My name is Wale, but people call me Saint Wale simply because everyone who is in Christ is a saint. In the last few episodes, we've begun to look at this series in the fourth gospel. That's the Gospel of John. We're looking at the signs there. There are 7 signs there. Peculiarly to John, he doesn't use the word miracles. He calls them signs. And like road signs, like any other sign, they point to something. They give direction. They give a message. So we've been looking at these signs, and we've considered the first 2 signs. The first one in John chapter 2, which is the turning of water into wine. And then the second one you see in John chapter 4 is the man that came all the way from Capernaum to Cana of Galilee, asking Jesus to come and heal his dying son. So we've covered those 2 signs comprehensively, extensively. We want to go to the third sign today. And I've got with me today none other person than my brother, Saint Kay Kayode. Welcome to Saint Wale.
Thank you very much, sir. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to our viewers from wherever you're watching from. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Good. Always a pleasure to just sit around God's word and discuss. And then when we discuss this, many times we have in mind what Romeo, the young man who got saved, not in the last 2 years, the questions he's asking. And so we try to address his questions or questions of anyone in his shoes. So we're looking at the third sign today. And this we can say in John chapter 5. And so if you don't mind, I can read from John chapter 5. And then, of course, I'm reading from the translation I began to use at the beginning of this year, January. Normally what I do is every 3 to 5 years, I change what I call my base translation. So at the moment, my base translation is CSB, Christian Standard Bible. So I'm reading from verse 1 of John chapter 5. After this, a Jewish festival took place, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. By the sheep gate in Jerusalem, there is a pool called Bethesda in Aramaic, which has 5 colonnades. Within these lay a large number of the disabled, blind, lame, and paralyzed. Now, there are many translations that don't have verse 4 of this text, but in a traditional translation like New King James Version, it has verse 4 that says, "For an angel went down at a certain time into the pool and stirred up the water. Then whosoever stepped in first, after the stirring of the water, was made well of whatever disease he had." Verse 5, back to CSB. "Now, one man was there who had been disabled for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and realized he had already been there a long time, he said to him, 'Do you want to get well?' 'Sir,' verse 7, the disabled man answered, 'I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up. But while I'm coming, someone goes down ahead of me.' Verse 8, 'Get up,' Jesus told him, 'pick up your mat and walk.' Instantly, the man got well, picked up his mat, and started to walk. Now, that day was the Sabbath." Maybe we should stop there and consider this third sign. In many respects, this third sign is different from the first and the second we have witnessed. The first one, there was the wedding. there was a need, and Mary, came to Jesus. It was like an intercessor, acting on behalf of the couple, the party who had a need, and so they came to Jesus. The second one is also like an intercessor involved as well. The man whose son is dying travels 20 miles to Jesus. But here in the third sign, there is no such thing as an intercessor here. It's Jesus who goes to this place. So, where do you want to start, Kay? Do you want to start by the place called the pool, called Bethesda in Aramaic, the sheep pool, or the venue, or the people there, full of invalids, disabled, blind, lame, and paralyzed? Or the fact that there was a Jewish festival taking place there in Jerusalem, and the city is full. And so, yeah, where do you want to start?
There's so many places we can start from, but I think that the most obvious thing here is that there is a man who is suffering here, and he isn't suffering alone. There are too many people who are suffering alongside him, and and just as you have noted previously, the two signs that we have treated, the people came to Jesus, or at least someone came to Jesus. And you would say that's faith. Faith moves people towards Jesus, right? But here, we just see grace at work. It is pure grace. And this is Jesus coming to meet man. And in all of these, if there's anyone that speaks to the subject of salvation, this mirrors a lot, in a lot of ways, the subject of salvation. But I don't even want to go into that yet. But most importantly, and even those ones where people needed to come to Jesus, would remember that Jesus always had to go first. For example, he had to go to the wedding, then the mother was able to come to him. The man from Capernaum heard that Jesus had come to Cana. Jesus was in his neighborhood. That was why he had access to Jesus. So the things of God always start with God moving first, actually. It is just that here, the man is not even making any move. Jesus has moved towards this man, and this man is not making any move because he's been weakened. His resolve has been battered. His confidence is gone because of the circumstances that he's been in for the past 38 years. And they were by the temple, right? Because those sheep gates actually lead to the temple. The 5 porches lead to the temple. And it's amazing how the temple that is supposed to be the place of succor, the place of healing, then becomes a place of desperation, a place of competition, and sometimes the very thing that you need to move is your very weakness. For example, an angel would come once in a while to steer that pole, and the first person to get into it. And this was a man who was lame. How was he going to get into that water? And he just tells me, because this is a sign, like we've said, if what is going to earn me God's approval is holy living, but I'm sold into sin because of my carnal nature, until help comes from outside, I really, really cannot please God. I really, really cannot achieve that thing because the requirement for my healing is actually what I lack. For some other people, for example, for the blind, the requirement for their healing is not what they lack. The requirement for their healing is mobility, but they can move. They just don't have eyes. So once they sense that, but the very requirement for his healing is actually his disability. and I just look at myself and says, and sorry, I'm going into application already. But if Jesus had not come, the requirement for walking with God is holiness. And yet that is our disability, our very nature consumed in sin. There was no way we were going to be freed if help doesn't come. That was why Moses could not help us. The Bible says that the law came through Moses, but the law only came to compound our woes. Paul was saying in Romans, he says, if the law had not come, I wouldn't have known that I was sinful, but now the law has come, now I know I'm sinful and I'm dead. But grace has come. He was around the law, and the law wasn't helping him because it was around, and 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 the circumstance that he was is very much likened to religion. Because in
Okay,
religion,
maybe
maybe
you pause there because you have to do some dilute to taste
yeah,
because you're just pouring everything, and then we have to like really slow down a little bit and try and break this up for Romeo's sake,
I understand.
because you look at the environment where this guy is,
Yeah.
in Bethesda, and he's by this pool there, and the pool is ringed by 5 covered porches or colonnades, and of course, they said the number 5 means mercy and grace in Hebrew. So here you are people lying on mats, rags, and bare stone watching the water, and according to tradition, like you've said, people come around to an angel comes around to stir the water. But what really got my attention as I read this text is the description of the people there, and that's really what, the verse 3 says, within this lay a large number of the disabled, blind, lame, and paralyzed. And then of course, it then zeroes in on a particular person who's been there for 38 years. And I think that tells us about this is something that it's something that was set up in the last 5-10 years. Maybe there is terrorist attack, and so there are many people who are displaced within the country, and then you then set up a camp to look after these people, and all these things have happened in the last 5-10 years. No, this place has been there for at least 38 years, because we know of a person who had been in that position for 38 years. So this is something that's been there for a long time. And another thing that really piqued my interest as I look into this thing is that all these people are there, and it appears that they won't just be the only people there, because each of them will probably have helpers, family members who will help them. I mean, like the guy said, I had no one. So probably others had people who will help them. The blind might have somebody who will lead them. The lame might have somebody who will carry them. The paralyzed might have somebody. And they can't be there by themselves without food supply, water supply, and all that. So there'll be people, a market will have built around that area. There'll be those who will be buying and selling, because once there are people, a need will be their needs will have to be met, and then a demand and supply, so a market will form. And so there it says large number of people are in this place. But there's something you touched there which I really want to talk about: the ministry. This place that is meant to be a house of mercy then has become a house of rising and falling hope. There's a hope that an angel will come. And then there's a hope that you'll be the first to jump in. And then the moment somebody jumps in before you, your hope is dashed. And then you hope again that the angel will come. So this is a place of rising and falling hope. And it could be destabilizing. This is supposed to be a house of mercy. And yet, this is where mercy is supposed to be. It has become a location, a picture of our condition, which I think you have alluded to. How many of us live beside pools of mixed opportunities? Opportunities will always be there, but just that is limited in this situation. According to legend, that it's only one person, the first person that gets in, that gets healed. How does that speak to us in our human condition? Sin. And it reminds you of the first law of Newton. A body continues in its rest or uniform motion in a straight line unless an external force is applied to it. So we will have continued in sin and decay unless mercy that comes. So I totally agree with you. This is a picture of our humanity, our conditions, and a force outside of ourselves. Jesus Christ now comes in to show us something that we couldn't have helped ourselves. Oh yeah, go ahead. So that I just wanted to we shouldn't be in a hurry so that we don't put in so much in a very short period of time.
I get, so that we don't even confuse the people, because they need to understand the situation before they understand the application, actually. And just like you said, number one, they are by the sheep gates, which means that that pole is by the temple. For people who know, the sheep gate leads to the temple. It's one of the gates of the temple.
Yeah, I've been there. I mean, at least the modern when I went to Israel a few years ago.
Okay. So you saw it, right? It should be by the temple from that description, and because it's by the temple, we could also say it is mirroring what is happening in the temple, actually. And what is happening in the temple, in the Jewish temple, is religion. There are a lot of sick people outside by the pool, basically, but the people inside the temple too are sick spiritually. And there is competition on the inside on who is going to be healed. And because that's what religion does. Religion breeds desperation, it breeds competition. People don't care whether they are pleasing God, they just want to be sure that they are better than the other person. And which is what we're also seeing at this pool. There's a rat race around the holy water. There is, I must get there before you. I must be better than you. I must. So really the focus is on self and being able to do what will bring healing to us. And like you said, it's a place of rising hope, the dashing of hope. It's really in the Old Testament. Let's go back to it. So the people were under the law. It's usually one man at a time that seems to be able to enter into the fullness, maybe not even the fullness, but at least embody the plan of God for that generation. For example, in David's generation, he was able to discern something about God that nobody in his generation knew. In fact, I like to describe David as the Christian in the Old Testament. Samuel discerned God in his generation, and we have some of these superstars, individuals. Moses was a superstar, so it were. But in the New Testament, at the advent of Jesus, we're not looking for superstars anymore. Jesus is a superstar. Remember in that. So by that,
but before you go into that, before we let me sorry to stop you there. Before you go into that, let's look at the picture that we see here. When you are in this situation for a long time, hopes. Many times your hope has risen and it has been dashed. Many times, not a year, not two, not three, not four, not five, maybe 10 years.
Yeah.
It comes to a point where maybe you stop expecting change, and then you begin to adapt to the limitation and you learn to survive beside your paralysis. And the striking thing about this passage is that Jesus walks directly into this environment that you talked about. But let's see the damage this environment has done to people. That has done to people who are there. Because there is no indication of these people being able to help one another. It's like everyone is focused on themselves, waiting for the pull. So the pull becomes the focus. And the time of attention is when the angel comes there. But outside of that, I think it's like business as usual. So when you think about this, I'm just wondering, is it not in any one of these people to say, look, let's come together and see how we can alleviate our suffering? Let's see how we can help ourselves.
No,
I'm just wondering.
That's what I was trying to explain. Religion is competition. Anywhere that there is religion is competition. My business is better than yours. because there's a desperation to show that you're the best. There's a desperation to project yourself to be the center of attraction, and that's what I'm trying to say. Now in the Old Testament, just like we see one person healed in a year, you see one person maybe in 100 years who would be the man after God's heart.
Hold on. So the blind, for example, will say, "Okay, I mean, the problem with is that I can't just I'm off, I'm fine, just I cannot see." And the
Yeah,
paralyzed will say, "You know what? I can see, I can hear, just that I can't walk." So
yes,
there's like they compare disabilities.
absolutely. They compare disabilities, and then is now who is able to pull on God, and because you and I have been in religious settings, and all of the prayers are self-centered. Me first,
Yeah,
do mine first. I remember growing up in a church, and some of the prayers would be that God in my family let me excel more than every other person.
yeah,
That's what we're seeing playing out there. Because
yeah.
we think that God's power cannot go round. Or maybe
Oh
even
yeah,
if we
because
think it can go round, we don't
yeah,
even want it to go round. I want
yeah,
to be able to
but it's
come back.
market forces, isn't it? There is no supply of anything. There's no endless supply of anything really, and
Mm,
so the world's economy runs on scarcity.
mm,
And the more scarce a product is or a service is, the higher the value, the
mm.
higher the price, really. And
Yeah,
so it's the same thing is applied to God, his presence, his power. So God's power is limited in supply. And so whoever gets there first, that's what you are
absolutely.
saying.
Yeah, absolutely. So in their minds, these are covenanted people. These are covenanted people. These are people that they don't even need to be by that water. They could go home and say prayer. Jabez was just a man like this other man who was fed up with his lot, as it were, and he went home and spoke to God. These are people that shouldn't be in that situation. The only reason they are kept in that situation is what we're talking about. It's religious. It's a religious mindset. It's a religious. It's God is cast, like you said, and so I have to compete with the other person. And so when grace walked in, when the embodiment of grace walked in, all of them could not even discern him, because if all of them could discern him, all of them would be healed that day. But too focused on self that when
Yeah,
grace came in, they
yeah.
couldn't.
Yeah,
They couldn't.
it's amazing, because again, we'll come back to this man that we'll find out later on that when the guy 38-year problem has been healed, he didn't even know who spoke to him. He didn't even know who healed him. So there was no identification. There was no recognition of who Jesus was in that instance.
Yes, sir.
So yeah. So it's. I mean, it's. I think I agree with you. It paints the picture of humanity.
Yeah,
And then Jesus then comes in, embodiment of grace comes in.
yeah.
The one that in John chapter 1 we read of, that the law came through Moses, but grace and truth were revealed in Christ Jesus, then comes into this place. And he goes for this particular one. Verse 5, one man was there who had been disabled for 38 years.
Yes.
Now think about this. At this point, I mean, Jesus went to the cross at about 33 and a half. So this
Yeah.
guy had been in his position before
Before
Jesus
Jesus
in
was
the
born.
flesh was born.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been there. It's been there. Sin and
So
Satan.
longer than the years of Christ's earthly life.
Sin and Satan are unforgiving. They are unforgiving. They don't oppress you for a while or afflict you for a while and tell you to go and have mercy on you. If you allow Satan, he's ready to afflict and oppress a person in 2 lifetimes or 10 lifetimes. They are unforgiving. You are the one that must find a way out, or trust that God will come to you, as in this case.
I read something somewhere, which is true. I think it was based on John 10:10. The thief has come to kill, to
Yeah.
steal, and to destroy. And then I had I think it was, I'm trying to remember, I probably will remember his name. And it makes sense. He said, the first plan of the enemy is to kill you.
Yeah.
But if he realizes that he can easily kill you, he won't want to kill you easily. He will want you to suffer long.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Want it to suffer long. He drags it on and on and on and on until you drop. So here's the man, 38 years.
38 years. Yeah. He would have died in that state.
Long enough for disappointment to become identity.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Long enough for hope to fade into routine.
Yeah.
And long enough to stop imagining another kind of future.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, if we're liking this to the human condition, it talks about how long, we've been in our sinful situation, in our sinful condition from the time of Adam, at least a minimum of, if we're, how do I say, young have, believers, then it's a minimum of about 4,000 years that we've been in sin. And again, this very close. That's 4 millennia. This guy is about 4 decades, so it's quite close as well. Which it should even be like, if we really want to calculate it, it should be about 3,800 years there after the fall or something. So it's almost like a mirror, like it's mirroring the situation of the world, the situation of man at the advent of Christ. And if Jesus had not come, we must be forever grateful for the coming of Jesus, because we would have remained in that state and would have remained there eternally and would have faced the eternal consequence of our sinful nature.
But look at this, waiting for 38 years. I mean, waiting changes people. We say, I think it's in Proverbs or so, hope deferred makes the heart sick. So this guy's heart will have been sick many times over, hoping, and disappointment settles in layers, your desires become guarded, and you are very cautious in believing. Very, very cautious. And this is the guy that Jesus comes to, which is basically comes to us, humanity. And we don't know how Jesus knew about the man's situation, because Jesus, knowing he had been there for this many years, he might have asked around. He might have known supernaturally, because we'll see later on, Paul says, when it comes to the spiritual, I don't want you to be ignorant. And he goes on to talk about word of knowledge, knowing things that God reveals to you that you will not have known naturally. 38 years feels overwhelming to us as people. We measure time and conclude some things are far too gone, too entrenched, have been in this situation for this long. But that's not the way Jesus looks at this.
Yeah.
He comes to this guy and he's asked him, maybe I think maybe we'll go to the next episode to discuss this question Jesus asked him, because that's something I really want us to dwell so much on, and the answer the man gives, because it shows what waiting, endless waiting, hope rising, hope falling, the heart has become so sick 1,000,000 times over, what it does to people, what it does to their identity, that even when mercy, grace comes in, we don't easily and quickly grab what she has to offer. So I think this we need to explore in the next episode.